You've been following all the rules. You've been the provider, the protector, the one who shows up consistently. You've listened to every piece of relationship advice, read every book, and yet somehow you're still watching the woman you care about drift away. You're doing everything right, but something's missing, isn't it? Here's what most men don't understand. Attraction isn't logical. It doesn't follow the neat formulas we've been taught. While you're busy proving your worth through actions and words, you're missing the deeper psychological currents that truly capture and hold a woman's attention. The ancient Stoics understood something profound about human nature, that true power comes not from what you do, but from who you are when you're not doing anything at all. Marcus Aurelius wrote about accepting what fate brings us and loving with our whole heart. But he also understood that love without strength becomes neediness, and strength without wisdom becomes tyranny. The hidden psychology you've been missing. What I'm about to share with you isn't about manipulation or games. It's about understanding 12 fundamental psychological switches that exist in every woman's mind. Switches that respond not to your efforts to impress, but to your ability to remain centered in your own power. Think about the last time you felt truly confident. Not the kind of confidence that comes from external validation, but the deep, unshakable certainty that comes from knowing who you are, regardless of circumstances. That feeling, that's what we're talking about. That's the frequency that creates genuine attraction. Most men approach relationships like they're applying for a job. They present their qualifications, highlight their achievements, and wait for approval. But here's the truth that will change everything. Women don't fall in love with your resume. They fall in love with how they feel about themselves when they're with you. The Stoic foundation of authentic attraction. The Stoics taught us that we cannot control others, only ourselves. Yet in relationships, men constantly try to control outcomes through their behavior. They text at the right intervals, say the right things, and wonder why it feels forced. Real attraction happens when a woman encounters a man who doesn't need her validation to feel complete. Not because he's cold or indifferent, but because he's genuinely content with who he is. This isn't about playing hard to get, it's about being hard to get because your life is already full and meaningful. Seneca once said, "If you want to be loved, love." But he didn't mean chase love desperately. He meant become the kind of person who naturally attracts love through their own completeness. When you're not trying to fill a void through someone else, your presence becomes magnetic rather than needy.
The 12 switches that change everything. These psychological switches aren't tricks to manipulate women. They're insights into human nature that, when understood, allow you to stop guessing and start leading with quiet confidence. Each switch represents a fundamental aspect of feminine psychology that responds to masculine presence, not the loud, aggressive kind, but the calm, centered strength that doesn't need to prove itself.
The man who understands these switches doesn't chase, he doesn't convince, he doesn't explain his worth. Instead, he embodies it so naturally that others are drawn to discover what makes him different. Are you ready to stop being the man who does everything right but gets left behind? Are you prepared to understand what truly creates lasting attraction, not through effort, but through presence? The 12 switches I'm about to reveal will transform not just how women see you, but how you see yourself. Because at the end of the day, the most attractive thing about a man isn't what he can do for someone else. It's who he is when no one's watching, and how that inner strength quietly commands respect without ever demanding it. Switch 1. The hidden emotion, uncertainty. Let me ask you something that might sting a little. When was the last time a woman felt genuinely uncertain about you? Not confused by mixed signals or games, but that deep, magnetic uncertainty that comes from encountering a man who doesn't need her approval to feel complete.
Most men today are too obvious. They show their hand immediately. Within the first conversation, she knows exactly how you feel, what you want, and how desperately you need her validation. You compliment her before she's earned it. You text back within minutes because you're afraid she'll lose interest. You laugh at jokes that aren't funny and agree with opinions you don't share, all because you need to be liked before you can be respected.
But here's what the ancient Stoics understood about human nature. The greatest power is often simple presence. Seneca wrote about this, how a man who is complete within himself naturally draws others into his orbit, not through effort, but through the quiet confidence that comes from not needing anything from anyone.
The autopilot you're disrupting. Think about how most men approach women. They follow a predictable script: excessive compliments, constant availability, immediate emotional investment. Women have seen this movie 1,000 times. They know how it ends before it begins. Their emotional autopilot kicks in, and you become just another predictable guy who's trying too hard.
But when a woman encounters a man who doesn't follow this script, a man who is genuinely content with or without her attention, something shifts. Her autopilot stops working. She can't categorize you immediately. And in that moment of uncertainty, something powerful happens. She starts thinking about you.
I've watched this play out countless times. The guy who gets the girl isn't always the most handsome or successful. It's often the one who creates that subtle sense of mystery through his calm, centered presence. He doesn't chase validation because he doesn't need it. He doesn't explain himself because he's comfortable with who he is.
The feeling she can't forget. Here's the truth that will change how you approach every interaction. Women don't fall in love with what they see in you. They fall in love with how they feel about themselves when they're around you.
When you're desperate for her approval, you make her feel like she's doing you a favor by giving you attention. But when you're genuinely uncertain whether you even want her in your life, she starts wondering what she needs to do to earn a place there. The dynamic completely flips.
This isn't about being cold or indifferent. It's about being so grounded in your own worth that her opinion of you, while welcome, isn't necessary for your happiness. Marcus Aurelius taught us that our peace comes from within, not from external validation. When you embody this truth, you become magnetic without trying. The power of not needing to prove yourself. Most men are constantly in performance mode. They're auditioning for the role of boyfriend, trying to prove they're worthy of love. But think about the men you truly respect. Do they spend their time proving themselves to you? Of course not. They simply are who they are, and you either appreciate it or you don't.
The same principle applies with women. When you stop trying to prove your worth and start simply being worthy, everything changes. You speak less, but say more. You're present without being needy. You show interest without desperation.
This creates uncertainty in the best possible way. She can't quite figure you out, and that mystery becomes irresistible. Not because you're playing games, but because you're genuinely living from a place of inner completeness.
The question isn't whether she likes you. The question is whether you've decided she's worth your time. When you operate from this mindset, you create the kind of uncertainty that doesn't frustrate, it fascinates. And fascination, my friend, is the beginning of everything.
Switch to emotional presence as silent obsession. Picture this. You walk into a room, and before you even speak a word, she feels something. Not your cologne, not your appearance, your emotional presence. It's that invisible energy that either makes people lean in or step back. Most men have no idea they're broadcasting their inner state 24/7, and women are picking up every signal. Here's what most guys don't realize. A woman feels your emotional presence before she hears your voice. She's scanning your posture. Is it confident or compensating? Your tone, is it steady or seeking approval? Your reactions, are you unshaken or easily rattled? Even your stillness tells a story. Are you comfortable in your own skin, or are you fidgeting with nervous energy? This isn't some mystical concept. It's basic human psychology. Women have evolved to be incredibly sensitive to emotional cues because throughout history, their safety often depended on reading the emotional state of the men around them. That skill hasn't disappeared. It's been refined.
The difference between performing and being. Most men are constantly performing. They're thinking 3 steps ahead. If I say this, will she like me? If I act that way, will she be impressed? But here's the paradox. The moment you start performing, you lose the very thing that makes you attractive, authentic presence.
Epictetus taught us something profound. We have 2 ears and 1 mouth, so that we can listen twice as much as we speak. But he wasn't just talking about conversation. He was talking about being present, truly absorbing the moment instead of planning your next move.
When you're fully here, not anticipating her reaction or rehearsing your response, something magnetic happens. Your presence becomes solid, grounded, unshakable. And that stability, that's what allows her to relax and be feminine around you.
Think about the last time you were completely absorbed in something you loved. Maybe working on a project, playing sports, or having a deep conversation with a close friend. Remember that feeling of being totally present? That's the energy that draws people in. Not because you're trying to be attractive, but because you're completely authentic. Creating safety through strength. Here's something that might surprise you. Women don't want to lead emotionally all the time. In today's world, many women are constantly in their masculine energy, making decisions, solving problems, being strong and independent. But deep down, most crave the safety to soften, to be feminine, to let their guard down.
Your emotional presence creates that safety. When she feels that you're not going to be shaken by her emotions, her moods, or her tests, she can finally exhale. She doesn't have to manage your emotional state on top of her own.
I've seen this countless times. A woman will test a man's emotional stability early in the relationship. She might get emotional about something small or create a little drama, not because she wants conflict, but because she needs to know, will this man remain steady when things get turbulent? The men who pass this test aren't the ones who avoid conflict or try to fix everything immediately. They're the ones who remain calm, present, and unshaken while still being compassionate. They don't take her emotions personally because they understand that her feelings aren't always about them.
The silent obsession. When you master emotional presence, something fascinating happens. Women become quietly obsessed with understanding you. They can't quite figure out why you're different from other men. You're not trying to impress them, yet they're impressed. You're not chasing their approval, yet they find themselves seeking yours. This creates what I call silent obsession. She thinks about you when you're not around because your presence left such a strong impression. Not because you were loud or demanding attention, but because you were so genuinely there that it felt different from every other interaction she's had.
The question isn't whether you can talk to women. The question is, can you be fully present with them without needing anything in return? When you can answer yes to that, you've unlocked something most men never discover.
Switch 3. Strategic absence triggers validation needs. Let me tell you about the most counterintuitive truth in relationships. The more available you make yourself, the less valuable you become. I know this goes against everything you've been taught about showing care and commitment, but hear me out.
Think about your phone right now. It's probably within arm's reach, ready to respond to her text within minutes. You've made yourself so constantly available that your attention has become as common as air. Essential, but completely taken for granted. And just like air, she only notices its value when it's suddenly absent.
Marcus Aurelius wrote something profound. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. Most men give away this power by making their entire emotional state dependent on her responses, her moods, her availability. But what if I told you that true strength comes from returning to yourself, not from constantly reaching toward her? The death of curiosity. Here's what happens when you're always available. You become predictable. She knows that no matter what time she texts, you'll respond. No matter what she asks, you'll drop everything. No matter how she treats you, you'll still be there. And predictability, my friend, is the enemy of attraction.
Women are naturally curious creatures. They want to explore, to discover, to uncover layers. But when you lay all your cards on the table immediately, when you're an open book with no mystery left to solve, you kill that natural curiosity. There's nothing left to wonder about, nothing left to chase. I've watched countless men make this mistake. They think that being constantly available shows love and dedication. But what it actually shows is that you don't have a life worth living without her. And that's not attractive. It's suffocating.
The art of genuine absence. Now, let me be clear about something crucial. I'm not talking about playing games or deliberately ignoring her to manipulate her emotions. That's childish and ultimately destructive. I'm talking about genuine absence, the natural result of having a life so full and meaningful that you can't always be available.
True absence comes from returning to yourself. It's when you're so engaged in your purpose, your growth, your passions, that you naturally become less available. You're not trying to provoke her or make her jealous. You're simply living a life that doesn't revolve around her validation.
When a woman encounters a man who has genuine reasons for his absence,
who's building something, pursuing goals, investing in relationships and activities that matter to him. She doesn't feel ignored. She feels intrigued. She starts to wonder, what is he doing that's more important than texting me back immediately?
The reflection she can't avoid. Here's where the psychology gets fascinating. When you're genuinely absent, not as a strategy, but as a natural consequence of your full life, something happens in her mind. She starts to reflect on your value. She begins to question her own importance in your world.
This isn't about making her feel insecure or unimportant. It's about helping her realize that your attention is a gift, not a given. When she has to earn your time and energy, she values it more. When she has to compete with your other priorities, she starts to see you as a man with options, with standards, with a life worth joining, rather than a life that needs her to complete it.
Think about the things you value most in your life. Are they the things that came easily, or the things you had to work for? The same principle applies to relationships. What comes too easily is rarely valued appropriately.
The power of your own mind. The Stoics understood that external validation is a trap. When you need her constant attention to feel good about yourself, you've given her power over your emotional state. But when you can be content with or without her immediate response, you reclaim that power.
The question isn't whether she's thinking about you when you're absent. The question is, are you so fulfilled by your own life that her absence doesn't diminish you? When you can answer yes to that, you've discovered something most men never will: true independence that naturally creates attraction. Switch for masculine. Calm creates emotional collapse. Here's a scene that plays out in relationships everywhere. She's upset about something, maybe work stress, family drama, or something you said that hit her the wrong way. Her emotions are running high, and in that moment, she's testing something deeper than you realize. She's not just expressing frustration, she's unconsciously asking, "Are you strong enough to handle me at my worst?"
Most men fail this test spectacularly. They either match her emotional intensity, trying to out-argue or out-emotion her, or they shut down completely, walking away or getting defensive. But there's a third option that most men never discover, the option that changes everything.
What if, instead of rising to meet her chaos, you remained completely calm? Not cold, not dismissive, but genuinely peaceful in the storm she's creating. Epictetus taught us something profound. It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. And nowhere is this more powerful than in the emotional dynamics between men and women, the hidden leadership she's craving. Here's what most men don't understand. Many women today are exhausted from leading emotionally. In their careers, their friendships, even in past relationships, they've had to be the strong one, the stable one, the one who keeps everything together. They're tired of controlling the emotional rhythm of every interaction.
When a woman gets emotional with you, she's often not looking for you to fix the problem or even agree with her. She's looking for you to be the rock that doesn't move when the waves crash against it. She wants to know that your emotional state isn't dependent on hers, that you can remain centered even when she can't.
I've seen this transformation happen countless times. A woman starts an argument, escalating her emotions, pushing harder and harder. But instead of pushing back, the man remains calm. He listens without getting defensive. He acknowledges her feelings without taking them personally. And something beautiful happens. she begins to soften. This isn't about winning or losing. It's about her finally feeling safe enough to let go of control because she knows you're strong enough to hold the space for both of you.
Breaking the pattern she's used to. Most women have learned to expect emotional chaos from men. They're used to guys who get triggered easily, who need their moods validated, who can't handle feminine emotion without making it about themselves. So when she encounters a man who doesn't fit this pattern, who remains genuinely calm in the face of her storm, it breaks her autopilot.
She's prepared for you to get angry, defensive, or to try to logic your way out of her emotions. But when you simply remain present and unshaken, she doesn't know what to do with that. Her usual strategies don't work. And in that moment of confusion, something deeper emerges. Trust.
Think about the last time you were truly upset about something. What did you need most in that moment? Someone to argue with you? Or someone strong enough to let you feel what you were feeling without making it worse? The same applies here.
The permission to stop fighting. Here's the beautiful paradox. When you stop fighting her emotions, she stops fighting yours. Your calm gives her permission to stop trying so hard to stay guarded. She realizes she doesn't have to be the strong one all the time because you're genuinely strong enough for both of you.
This isn't about suppressing your own emotions or becoming emotionally unavailable. It's about being so grounded in your own center that external storms don't shake your foundation. Marcus Aurelius wrote about being like a rocky headland against which the waves constantly crash, but which remains unmoved and stills the angry waters around it.
The question isn't whether you can handle her when she's happy and easygoing. The question is, can you remain centered when she's at her most chaotic? When you can answer yes to that, not through force or control, but through genuine inner strength, you become the kind of man she can finally surrender to, not in defeat, but in trust.
Switch 5, not needing her, makes her lean in. Here's a truth that will shake everything you think you know about relationships. The moment you stop needing her, she starts wanting you. I know this sounds backwards, especially in a culture that tells us love means being incomplete without someone else. But stay with me, because this principle will transform how women respond to you. Picture two different men. The first one lights up every time she texts, drops everything when she calls, and seems to lose himself whenever she's around. His happiness depends entirely on her mood, her attention, her approval. The second man enjoys her company but doesn't need it to feel complete. He has his own life, his own purpose, his own source of inner strength. Which one do you think she finds more attractive?
Marcus Aurelius wrote something that cuts straight to the heart of this. Very little is needed to make a happy life. It is all within yourself, in your way of thinking. When you truly understand this, when you become genuinely content with who you are, regardless of her presence, something magnetic happens. Your attention becomes a gift instead of a grasp.
The pressure that kills attraction. Neediness creates pressure, and pressure kills attraction faster than almost anything else. When a woman feels that your emotional well-being depends on her, she suddenly carries the weight of your happiness on her shoulders. That's not romantic, it's exhausting. Think about it from her perspective. If she knows that not responding to your text will ruin your day, that canceling plans will devastate you, that any sign of distance will send you into emotional chaos, how free does she feel to be herself? How authentic can she be when she's constantly managing your emotional state?
But when she realizes that you're genuinely okay with or without her, that you have your own source of happiness and fulfillment, she can finally relax. She doesn't have to perform or pretend. She can show up as herself because she knows you're not depending on her to complete you.
The magnetism of self-sufficiency. Here's what most men get wrong about self-sufficiency. They think it means being cold or distant. But authentic self-sufficiency isn't about pushing people away. It's about being so fulfilled in your own life that others want to be part of it.
When you're genuinely content with yourself, when you have passions that excite you, goals that drive you, and a sense of purpose that fulfills you, you become naturally attractive. Not because you're trying to impress anyone, but because fulfilled people are magnetic. They radiate a kind of energy that draws others in.
I've watched this play out countless times. The guys who struggle most with women are often the ones whose entire world revolves around getting female attention. But the men who naturally attract women, they're usually so busy building something meaningful that romance becomes just one part of a rich, full life. Earning a place in your world. Women don't want to be your whole world. They want to earn a place in a world that's already complete. There's a huge difference. When your life is empty without her, she becomes a crutch. But when your life is full and she adds to it, she becomes a choice. And being chosen feels infinitely better than being needed out of desperation. Think about the people you most respect in your life. Do you respect them because they need you, or because they choose to include you in their already meaningful existence? The same principle applies here. Respect and attraction grow when someone has to earn their place in your life, not when you hand it to them freely. This doesn't mean being difficult or playing hard to get. It means having standards, having boundaries, and having a life worth joining. When she realizes that being with you isn't about filling a void in your life, but about sharing in something already beautiful, everything changes.
The question isn't whether you can make her need you. The question is, are you so complete within yourself that your love becomes a gift rather than a demand? When you can answer yes to that, you'll discover what true attraction really looks like.
Switch 6. Strategic unavailability at right times. Let me ask you something that might sting. When was the last time someone truly missed you? Not just noticed you were gone, but actually felt your absence in a way that made them appreciate your presence more when you returned.
Most men today have become emotional vending machines, always available, always dispensing attention and validation on demand. You respond to every text immediately, you're free every time she wants to hang out, and you've essentially communicated that nothing in your life is more important than her convenience. And here's the brutal truth. Constant availability without boundaries breeds indifference.
Seneca understood something profound about human nature when he wrote, "He who is everywhere is nowhere." When you're always available, you become invisible. Your presence loses its weight, its significance, its value. You become like background music, pleasant enough, but easily ignored. The power of contrast. Think about your favorite song. What makes it special? It's not just the melody, it's the silence between the notes, the pauses that make you anticipate what comes next. The same principle applies to your presence in her life. Without contrast, even the most beautiful things become ordinary.
When you're strategically unavailable, and I mean genuinely unavailable because you're living your own life, not playing games, something powerful happens. Your presence becomes an event rather than a given. She starts to notice when you're there because she's experienced what it's like when you're not. I've watched men transform their relationships simply by reclaiming their time, not through manipulation or punishment, but through genuine self-respect. They stop dropping everything for every request. They maintain their commitments to themselves, their goals, their other relationships. And suddenly, the women in their lives start paying attention in a way they never did before.
Brothers, if these principles are starting to resonate with you, if you're seeing the patterns that have been holding you back, hit that like button. It tells me you're ready for this transformation, and it helps other men discover these life-changing truths.
The difference between games and boundaries. Let me be crystal clear about something. This isn't about playing hard to get or deliberately ignoring her to make her chase you. That's childish manipulation, and it always backfires eventually. What I'm talking about is something much deeper. It's about respecting your own time and energy enough to have boundaries around them.
When you have a life worth living, when you have goals that excite you, commitments that matter to you, and standards for how you spend your time, unavailability becomes natural. You're not trying to create scarcity, you're simply living with intention.
The man who cancels his workout to respond to her non-urgent text is communicating something dangerous, that he doesn't value his own commitments. But the man who says, "I'm in the middle of something important, let me call you later," is showing that he has priorities and standards. Which one do you think she respects more?
Making your presence memorable. Here's what happens when you master strategic unavailability. Your presence becomes memorable instead of expected. When she knows she can't have your attention whenever she wants it, she values it more when she gets it. When she realizes that your time is precious because you treat it as precious, she stops taking it for granted.
This creates a beautiful dynamic where your interactions become more meaningful. Instead of constant, low-level communication throughout the day, you have focused, intentional conversations. Instead of being available for every minor mood or random thought, you're present for the moments that actually matter. Think about the people you most look forward to seeing. Are they the ones who are always around? Or the ones whose presence feels special because it's not guaranteed? The same psychology applies here.
The respect that changes everything. When you demonstrate that you have boundaries around your time and energy, something shifts in how she sees you. You're no longer the guy who's always available because he has nothing better to do. You become the man whose attention is valuable because he values himself enough to be selective with it. The question isn't whether you can be available to her. The question is, do you respect yourself enough to be unavailable when it matters? When you can answer yes to that, you'll discover that absence really does make the heart grow fonder.
Switch 7. Self-respect as attractive force. Here's a question that will reveal everything about your relationships. What's the last boundary you refused to cross, even when it would have made someone else happy? When did you last say no to something that went against your values, even though saying yes would have been easier?
Most men today have forgotten what self-respect actually looks like. They bend their principles for approval, compromise their values for acceptance, and wonder why women lose interest even when they're being nice. But here's what they don't understand. Women aren't attracted to men who betray themselves for approval. They're attracted to men who have lines and keep them.
Marcus Aurelius wrote something that cut straight to the heart of this. Be like the rocky headland on which the waves constantly break. It stands firm, and round it the seething waters are laid to rest. Your boundaries aren't walls to keep people out. They're the foundation that makes you trustworthy, reliable, and ultimately attractive.
The rarity that creates magnetism. In a world where most men will say anything, do anything, and be anything to get approval, a man with genuine self-respect becomes rare. And rarity, my friend, creates value.
When she encounters a man who won't compromise his integrity for her smile, who won't abandon his principles for her attention, something shifts in how she sees him.
Think about the men you most respect in your life. Are they the ones who change their opinions based on who they're talking to, or the ones who remain consistent regardless of the audience? The same principle applies to attraction. Women are drawn to men who are the same person in private as they are in public, who have a core that doesn't shift with the wind.
I've watched this play out countless times. A woman will test a man's boundaries early in the relationship, not because she wants him to fail, but because she needs to know if he's real. She might ask him to cancel plans with his friends, to change something fundamental about himself, or to agree with something he clearly doesn't believe. The men who pass this test aren't the ones who give in. They're the ones who kindly but firmly hold their ground.
The mirror effect. Here's where self-respect becomes truly powerful. When you refuse to lower your standards, you make her question whether she's meeting them. This isn't about being judgmental or superior. It's about maintaining a level of integrity that naturally elevates the entire interaction.
When you won't tolerate disrespect, she starts respecting you more. When you won't accept poor treatment, she begins treating you better. When you demonstrate that you value yourself, she starts to see that value too. It's like holding up a mirror that reflects back the energy she's putting out.
This creates a beautiful dynamic where she wants to rise to meet your standards rather than you lowering yours to meet hers. She starts asking herself, am I being the kind of person who deserves this man's respect? And that internal question changes everything about how she shows up in the relationship.
The strength that doesn't need to argue. The most attractive form of self-respect is quiet and unshakable. It doesn't need to justify itself, defend itself, or prove itself to anyone. Marcus Aurelius understood this when he wrote about being a good man rather than arguing about what it means to be good.
When someone crosses your boundary, you don't need to get angry, defensive, or launch into a lecture about why they're wrong. You simply hold the line. Your actions speak louder than any argument ever could. This kind of calm, consistent self-respect is magnetic because it's so rare in a world full of people who negotiate their values for temporary comfort.
The question isn't whether you can make her respect you. The question is, do you respect yourself enough that others have no choice but to follow suit? When you can answer yes to that, when your self-respect becomes so natural and unshakable that it influences everyone around you, you've discovered one of the most powerful forces in human attraction. Switch 8, ability to walk away, changes everything. Here's a moment of brutal honesty. When was the last time you walked away from something that wasn't serving you? Not just talked about it, not just threatened it, but actually had the strength to turn your back on a situation that was draining your soul. Most men have forgotten this fundamental power, the ability to walk away.
I'm not talking about running from commitment or avoiding difficult conversations. I'm talking about something much deeper. The quiet confidence that comes from knowing you'd rather be alone than accept treatment that diminishes your worth. When a woman realizes you could actually leave and would, everything changes. The entire dynamic shifts and power rebalances in ways that transform the relationship forever.
Epictetus taught us that freedom is the only worthy goal in life. But most men have traded their freedom for the illusion of security in relationships. They've become so afraid of being alone that they'll accept anything: disrespect, manipulation, emotional chaos,
just to avoid the possibility of walking away. And that fear, she can smell it from a mile away. The fear that kills attraction. When you're afraid to lose her, you've already lost something more important, yourself. Think about how you behave when you're terrified of someone leaving. You compromise your values, ignore red flags, and accept treatment you'd never tolerate from a friend. You become a smaller version of yourself, and smaller men aren't attractive to anyone.
But here's what happens when you genuinely aren't afraid to lose her. You stop negotiating your self-respect. You stop walking on eggshells. You stop pretending that bad behavior is acceptable just because it's coming from someone you care about. And when she realizes that your love for her doesn't override your love for yourself, something powerful shifts in her mind.
She begins to understand that keeping you isn't guaranteed, that your presence in her life is a choice you make every day, not a desperate need you can't control. And that realization that you could actually walk away creates a healthy fear of losing something valuable.
The authentic state, not the strategy. Let me be absolutely clear about something. This isn't about threatening to leave every time you don't get your way. That's manipulation, and it's weak. What I'm talking about is an authentic internal state, a genuine willingness to choose your own well-being over a relationship that isn't serving you.
This authenticity is crucial because women can sense the difference between a man who's bluffing and a man who's genuinely prepared to walk away. The man who's bluffing is still operating from fear. He's using the threat of leaving as a tool to get what he wants. But the man who's genuinely prepared to walk away isn't using it as a tool at all. He's simply living from a place of self-respect that makes walking away a natural option when necessary.
I have seen men transform their relationships overnight simply by rediscovering this power. Not because they became cold or threatening, but because they remembered their own worth. They stopped begging for basic respect and started expecting it. They stopped trying to convince someone to treat them well and started walking away from those who wouldn't.
The power that changes everything. When you truly embody the ability to walk away, you reclaim something that most men have lost, the power to choose self-respect over confusion. You stop trying to figure out why she's treating you poorly and start deciding whether you'll accept it. You stop analyzing her mixed signals and start responding to them with clarity.
This doesn't make you cold or uncaring. If anything, it makes you more loving because your love comes from a place of strength rather than desperation. You can love her fully while still being willing to love yourself more. And that balance, that refusal to betray yourself for anyone else's approval, is one of the most attractive qualities a man can possess.
The question isn't whether you love her enough to stay. The question is, do you love yourself enough to leave if you need to? When you can answer yes to that with complete honesty, you've discovered a power that changes everything.
Switch 9. Unshakable certainty creates natural submission. Let me paint you a picture that might challenge everything you think you know about masculine and feminine dynamics. Imagine a woman who's been carrying the weight of every decision, leading every conversation, and managing every detail of her relationships. She's strong, capable, and independent, but deep down, she's exhausted from always having to be the one in control.
Then she meets a man who possesses something rare in today's world: unshakable certainty. Not arrogance, not aggression, not the need to dominate, but a quiet, calm clarity about who he is and what he stands for. And in that presence, something beautiful happens. She doesn't submit because she's weak. She surrenders because she finally feels safe enough to let go.
This is what most men completely misunderstand about feminine psychology. When I talk about submission, I'm not talking about control or dominance. I'm talking about trust. I'm talking about a woman feeling so secure in your certainty that she can finally stop trying to manage everything and everyone around her.
Marcus Aurelius understood this principle when he wrote about doing what is right and saying what is true. When you operate from this place of unwavering clarity, when your actions align with your values regardless of external pressure, you create something that's become incredibly rare, a space where others can relax their guard, the exhaustion she's carrying. Here's what most men don't realize. Many women today are tired of leading. In their careers, they make tough decisions. In their friendships, they often play the role of counselor and problem solver. In past relationships, they've had to be the strong one because the men in their lives were uncertain, wishy-washy, or constantly seeking validation.
When she encounters a man with genuine certainty, someone who knows what he wants, stands by his decisions, and doesn't waver when challenged, it's like finding an oasis in the desert. She doesn't have to figure out what you're thinking because you're clear about it. She doesn't have to manage your emotions because you're managing them yourself. She doesn't have to lead because you're finally strong enough to lead.
This isn't about making decisions for her or controlling her choices. It's about being so grounded in your own direction that she feels safe following your lead when it makes sense, and confident enough to express her own views when it doesn't.
The clarity that creates safety. Think about the last time you were around someone who was completely certain about something important. Not stubborn or closed-minded, but genuinely clear and confident in their position. How did that feel? There's something deeply calming about being around people who aren't constantly second-guessing themselves or looking for validation from others.
When you bring this kind of certainty to your interactions with women, you create psychological safety. She knows where you stand, what you value, and how you'll respond in different situations. This predictability, not in terms of being boring, but in terms of being reliable, allows her to soften in ways she might not have been able to with other men.
I've watched relationships transform when men finally embrace this principle. Instead of constantly asking, "What do you want to do?" they make plans and invite her to join. Instead of saying, "I don't know, what do you think?" they express their genuine opinion and create space for discussion. Instead of changing their position based on her reaction, they remain steady while staying open to her perspective.
Quick question, brothers. Which of these switches is hitting closest to home for you? Is it uncertainty, emotional presence, or the ability to walk away that you're going to focus on first? Drop a comment and let me know which principle you're ready to start embodying today.
The surrender that isn't defeat. When a woman surrenders to masculine certainty, she's not giving up her power. She's choosing to trust yours. She's not becoming weak. She's allowing herself to be feminine in a way that our culture often doesn't permit. And this surrender isn't permanent or complete. It's situational and beautiful.
The question isn't whether you can force her to submit. The question is, are you certain enough in yourself that she feels safe letting go of control? When you can answer yes to that, you've discovered something most men never will: the power of certainty that creates space for authentic feminine expression.
Switch 10 from being chosen to becoming the standard. Here's a moment of raw truth that might shake you to your core. You've been living your entire life backwards. From childhood, you were taught to seek approval, to prove your worth, to convince others that you deserve their attention and love. You've been trained to audition for the role of boyfriend, to compete for her affection, to demonstrate why you're better than the other guys.
But what if I told you that this entire approach is not only wrong, it's the very thing that's been sabotaging your relationships? What if the secret isn't becoming good enough to be chosen, but becoming the standard that others must rise to meet?
Epictetus taught us something profound. Know first who you are, and then adorn yourself accordingly. Most men skip the first part entirely. They never take the time to understand their own worth, their own values, their own non-negotiables. Instead, they shape-shift based on what they think each woman wants, becoming a different version of themselves for every relationship. The audition that never ends. Think about how you've approached relationships in the past. You probably spent countless hours crafting the perfect text message, planning the ideal date, trying to say exactly what she wanted to hear. You were essentially auditioning for her approval, hoping she'd choose you over all the other options.
But here's what that approach communicates: that you don't believe you're already enough, that your value is dependent on her validation, that you're willing to change who you are to earn a place in her life. And women can sense this desperation from miles away.
I've watched men exhaust themselves trying to be chosen. They become chameleons, adapting their personality to match what they think each woman wants. They lose themselves in the process. And ironically, they become less attractive because authenticity is one of the most magnetic qualities a person can possess.
The shift that changes everything. Now imagine a different approach entirely. Instead of trying to prove you're worthy of her standards, you become the standard. Instead of asking, "Am I good enough for her?" you start asking, "Is she good enough for me?" This isn't about arrogance or superiority. It's about recognizing your own inherent worth.
When you become the standard, you stop chasing and start choosing. You stop trying to convince and start evaluating. You stop performing and start being. This creates a fundamental shift in the dynamic, because now she's the one who needs to demonstrate her value to you.
This doesn't mean becoming cold or dismissive. It means living with such intentionality and self-respect that others naturally want to rise to meet your level. When you embody your values consistently, when you maintain your boundaries firmly but kindly, when you live like you're already enough, you become magnetic. Living like you're already enough. Here's the beautiful paradox. The moment you stop needing to be chosen, you become more choosable. When you're not desperately seeking approval, your attention becomes valuable. When you're not trying to prove your worth becomes obvious. When you're not chasing validation, you become worth validating. This creates what I call intentional attraction, rather than indifference. You're not playing games or being difficult. You're simply living from a place of such inner certainty that others are drawn to understand what makes you different.
I've seen men transform their entire dating life by making this one shift. Instead of wondering if they're good enough, they start wondering if she meets their standards. Instead of trying to impress, they start evaluating whether they're impressed. Instead of hoping to be chosen, they become the prize worth choosing. The standard you set. When you become the standard, you're not just changing how women see you, you're changing how you see yourself. You stop settling for relationships that drain you and start attracting ones that energize you. You stop accepting poor treatment and start expecting excellence.
The question isn't whether you're good enough to be chosen.
The question is, have you become the kind of man that others aspire to be chosen by? When you can answer yes to that, you've discovered the ultimate attraction secret. Switch 11, the power of selective vulnerability. Here's a truth that will completely change how you connect with women. Vulnerability isn't about emotional vomiting. It's not about dumping your entire life story on the first date or explaining every insecurity you've ever had. Real vulnerability, the kind that creates deep, lasting attraction, is an art form that most men have never learned.
Picture two different men. The first one meets a woman, and within hours, he's telling her about his childhood trauma, his ex-girlfriend who broke his heart, and his fears about the future. He thinks he's being authentic and open. The second man shares pieces of himself gradually, revealing his depth only when she's demonstrated that she values and respects what he's already shown her. Which one do you think she finds more intriguing?
Most men fall into one of two devastating traps. They either overshare immediately, treating every conversation like a therapy session, or they remain completely closed off, building walls so high that no one can get close. Both extremes kill attraction, but for different reasons. The oversharer gives away his power by making himself completely known before she's invested anything. There's no mystery left to uncover, no depth left to discover. The closed-off man never allows connection to happen at all. But there's a third way, selective vulnerability, and it changes everything.
The investment principle. Here's something fundamental about human psychology. We value what we have to earn more than what's freely given. When you hand over your deepest thoughts and feelings without her having to invest anything, you're essentially giving away diamonds for free. But when she has to earn glimpses into your inner world through her respect, attention, and genuine interest, those glimpses become precious.
Think about your most treasured possessions. Are they the things that came easily or the things you had to work for? The same principle applies to emotional connection. When a woman has to gradually earn your trust and openness, she values it infinitely more than if you'd given it away immediately. I've watched this play out countless times. The men who create the deepest connections aren't the ones who bear their souls on command. They're the ones who reveal themselves strategically, sharing a meaningful story when she's shown genuine curiosity, opening up about a struggle when she's demonstrated empathy, revealing a dream when she's proven she won't judge or dismiss it.
The timing that creates magic. Selective vulnerability isn't about manipulation, it's about wisdom. The ancient Stoics understood that sharing wisdom with those who aren't ready to receive it is like planting seeds in barren ground. The same applies to emotional openness. Your vulnerability is valuable, and valuable things should be shared thoughtfully. This means timing your openness based on her respect level, not her demands. When she says, "Tell me about your past relationships," you don't have to comply immediately. When she asks, "What are you afraid of?" you can choose whether she's earned that level of intimacy. This isn't being difficult, it's being intentional.
The magic happens when you share something meaningful at exactly the right moment. Maybe she's been consistently respectful for weeks, and then you share a story about a challenge you overcame. Maybe she's shown genuine empathy in how she treats others, and you open up about a fear you're working through. These moments create profound connection because they feel earned, not extracted.
The frame that doesn't break. Here's what most men don't understand. You can be vulnerable without being weak. Selective vulnerability allows you to maintain your masculine frame while still creating emotional intimacy. You're not hiding who you are. You're revealing who you are with intention and wisdom.
When you master this balance, something beautiful happens. She feels honored to receive your openness because she knows it's not something you give to everyone. This creates a safe space where she can also be vulnerable, building a connection that goes deeper than surface-level attraction.
The question isn't whether you can be vulnerable. The question is, are you wise enough to be vulnerable with the right person, at the right time, in the right way? When you can answer yes to that, you've discovered a level of connection that most men never experience.
Switch 12. Emotional leadership through non-reaction. Picture this scene that plays out in relationships everywhere. She comes home upset about something. Maybe her boss criticized her work, her friend said something hurtful, or she's just overwhelmed by life's pressures. Her emotions are running high, and in that moment, you have a choice that will determine the entire trajectory of your relationship.
Most men make one of two critical mistakes. They either match her emotional intensity, getting upset because she's upset, trying to fix everything immediately, or getting defensive if they think they're somehow to blame. Or they do the opposite. They shut down completely, walking away or becoming cold because they can't handle the emotional heat.
But there's a third option that most men never discover, and it's the difference between boys and men, between followers and leaders. True emotional leadership means staying centered while acknowledging her feelings. It means becoming the calm in her storm, not by dismissing her emotions, but by refusing to be swept away by them. Marcus Aurelius understood this principle when he wrote about being like a rocky headland against which waves constantly crash, but which remains unmoved and stills the angry waters around it. This isn't about being cold or unfeeling. It's about being so grounded in your own emotional center that you can hold space for someone else's chaos without losing yourself in it. The leadership she's craving. Here's what most men don't understand. When she's emotional, she's not looking for you to match her energy. She's looking for you to be the anchor that keeps both of you from drifting into chaos. She needs to know that no matter how turbulent her inner world becomes, you'll remain steady. Think about the last time you were really upset about something. What did you need most in that moment? Someone to escalate the situation with you, or someone strong enough to remain calm while you processed what you were feeling? The same principle applies here. When you refuse to be pulled into her emotional state, you're not being dismissive or uncaring. You're providing something incredibly valuable: consistent emotional stability. You're showing her that your emotional state isn't dependent on hers, that you can remain centered even when she can't. I've watched relationships transform when men finally understand this principle. Instead of getting defensive when she's upset, they listen without taking it personally. Instead of trying to immediately fix her problems, they create space for her to feel what she's feeling. Instead of matching her intensity, they become the calm presence that allows her to find her own center again, the trust that changes everything. When you consistently demonstrate this kind of emotional leadership, something beautiful happens. She begins to trust your stability. She realizes that no matter what emotional storm she's going through, you're not going to abandon ship or make the situation worse by adding your own chaos to the mix. This creates a profound sense of safety. She knows she can express her emotions around you without fear that you'll either shut down or spiral out of control yourself. This safety allows her to be more authentic, more vulnerable, and ultimately more connected to you. But here's the most powerful part. In your calm presence, she learns to regulate herself. When you refuse to escalate, she has no choice but to eventually come down from her emotional peak. When you remain steady, she begins to mirror that stability. You become a living example of emotional mastery,
and that example teaches her more than any words ever could.
The strength that doesn't fight. This kind of emotional leadership isn't about suppressing your own feelings or becoming emotionally unavailable. It's about being so secure in yourself that external emotional storms don't shake your foundation. It's about having the strength to remain compassionate without becoming reactive. The question isn't whether you can handle her when she's happy and easygoing. The question is, can you remain the calm, steady leader when her emotions are at their most intense? When you can answer yes to that, you've mastered something most men never will: the art of emotional leadership that creates deep, lasting attraction and trust.
Gentlemen, if these 12 principles have resonated with something deep inside you, if you've recognized yourself in the man who's been doing everything right but still feeling like something's missing, then you're ready for the transformation that awaits.
But here's the truth Marcus Aurelius would tell you. Knowledge without action is just entertainment. These aren't concepts to admire, they're principles to embody. The question isn't whether you understand these switches, it's whether you'll have the courage to become the man who activates them naturally.
Which of these 12 switches hit you the hardest? Was it the realization about uncertainty? The power of walking away? Or maybe the truth about emotional leadership? Drop a comment below and tell me which principle you're going to start working on first. Your story might be exactly what another man needs to hear to begin his own transformation.
If you're serious about becoming the man who doesn't need these techniques because he embodies these principles, then hit that subscribe button and join the Stoic Happy Soul community. We're building something here, a brotherhood of men who refuse to settle for mediocrity in love, life, and leadership.
And if you know a man who's stuck in the cycle of trying harder but getting further behind, share this video with him. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is the truth they're not ready to hear, but desperately need to understand.
Remember, brothers, the world doesn't need more men who know what to do. It needs more men who have the strength to do what they know is right. Your journey to becoming that man starts now. Subscribe to Stoic Happy Soul, turn on notifications, and let's build the life and the love you actually deserve.